my thing. Never mind. Good to go. Okay, so call the meeting to order. Have the agenda in front of us. And we have a few closed session ones. Right. Okay. Any changes to the agenda? If not, motion to accept as presented. Thank you, Councillor Gramlich. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. So we'll start with minutes of a previous meeting held on November 30th on page 3 of our package. Any issues with these minutes? Councillor Adams? Motion to accept. Councillor Adams makes a motion to accept as presented. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. CEO update.
So good evening, Your Worship and Council. The CAO update, written updates are circulated for you. One of the things I wanted to make mention for everybody watching on Zoom is that the CAO updates are also posted on our website under the CAO, under the tab that says from the desk of the CAO. And they have been posted in the past, and we will make sure that they continue to be posted there before the meetings start. So that's a place to find it and to be able to follow along. Sorry, I just need to switch screens here. So in terms of CAO update, received word this week that the Alberta Municipalities Newcomer Readiness project, which is a project sponsored by the Alberta Municipalities, formerly known as AUMA, has done some work around assessing our community in terms of readiness for new people into Canada. That report is going to be made available this week. Administration has seen a draft of it and have no concerns with that draft, and we'll get that to council as soon as we can. Administration also met with Alberta Parks and the MD today to have a very positive working meeting around a potential collaboration agreement, and hope to have something in place by the end of January, early mid-February. Some very positive conversations around that. We'd look at working arrangements to assist each other around the Slave Lake Provincial Park. Predominantly the beach is the topic of discussion. Scrolling through the update, most of the updates are just department updates as to the day-to-day activities of the town. Of course, as people often are asking about public works and what's happening with road and snow clearing, sanding, and snow plowing is just progressing as required until there's more snowfall, and then they'll go back into the regular mode. Operations is also dealing with a small water main break near the town shop, but it's my understanding that that's well under control and had very minimal effect on services. Under the fire department, I also wanted to make note that the fire chief and deputy chief have had met with the MD council, and their CAO went over the regional fire services as well as emergency management presentation, very similar to what they did with our town council, just trying to make sure that that they're also on the same page and same board and establish those regional relationships. And then I was going to scroll down to enforcement. Another project that the Alberta government has had underway for quite some time is the Alberta Justice Transformation Initiative, which is still on track for February 1st. So the biggest thing for our peace officers is that you'll see that tickets will, as of that day, will be issued electronically. A driver will receive a plain piece of paper for a ticket. And the adjudication side of things will be done differently. The traffic tickets, for the most part, will no longer go through the court system. It will go through a separate adjudication system. And so this is something that the province has been working on. And I know we had budgeted money in our budget to be able to make sure our peace officers have the right equipment in terms of the e-ticketing side of things. From our peace officers' perspective, it will save some time in terms of court attendance and actually administering tickets and those kinds of things. And then I'm also scrolling down to facilities and parks. There was a question last time about the different categories that facilities uses to categorize their work orders, and they're provided for you. Level 1 being the lowest level of work order. That's more where we're talking about preventive type maintenance and the daily physical checks of our facilities and buildings. And that's where our employees should be spending a lot of time doing that so that we're not dealing with higher issue things. All the way up to level 2, 3, and 4. 4 is those more complex tasks where we need contractors involved and so on. So happy to answer any questions around those levels. And then the last item I was going to highlight is just ongoing challenges with some of the COVID rules and challenges of operating our facilities. And we have received some challenging situations arising at the MRC, and we're continuing to work with our user groups around those situations, just to work through trying to follow the provincial restrictions that are in place and trying to find ways of working together with our user groups to make those to make things work within this environment. So. That's all I have for verbal updates. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions, Councillor Adams.
Just a quick question on the enforcement section. You've got the complaints past week have primarily been around sidewalk, snow, animal control, and parking, whatnot. Do we actually collect data on what those are, how many are resolved, how many warnings, anything like that as far as the town goes?
So we do keep track of the numbers of complaints. How they're resolved would require a little bit further digging. I'm sure the software reporting can provide that for us, but we don't have that, like it's not readily available. It could be, it's not impossible to do that, but we do have a database that everything's calculated in for sure.
I just think it'd be nice to know numbers, what we're dealing with. Like, is that one complaint about sidewalk snow or 500 or, just curiosity.
Yeah, that's correct. I think in the last week it's been, and this is just an approximate number, around 10 to 15 files altogether. That's why they've also spent more time doing some traffic enforcement, because their files have been a little bit slower. And the majority of those were sidewalk snow clearing with a couple of animal control and parking related complaints in. Didn't provide the exact numbers because it hasn't been a lot of files this last week.
Other questions from council? I had two here. So first off, can you elaborate a little bit, Gary, on, you're talking about these issues at our facilities there? Like what kind of specific issues? Like your thing is, and I don't want to go into a whole bunch of detail, I guess they're specific, but like that one's pretty generic. So are these?
So there's some challenges with our customers and people relating to some of our user groups not complying with rules and being very difficult for our staff. I won't go into details beyond that, but when staff make a request to someone, there's some inappropriate behaviors that are happening. And so those are being addressed with the user groups.
Okay. Next one, you have a note on here that pool will be open 7 days a week for the holiday schedule. What, that I don't mean to sound stupid, but does that mean like we're open for Christmas or what?
Not Christmas Day, but no, we'll be reinstating them. We've been closed on Mondays,
right?
Just because of staffing,
right? And
our staffing levels have stabilized. We've worked really hard at trying to train and recruit more casual lifeguards, and so we'll be open to be able to open the time in between Christmas and New Year's. Obviously not our stat holidays, but we'll be open more throughout that time frame.
Okay, so we're not opening the pool during stat holidays.
No.
Okay. Which is our normal process. So I just wanted to clarify that one. Any other questions, comments? If not, okay, let's jump into reports and new business. Gosh.
Good evening, Your Worship and member of council. The purpose of this report is to provide a final project update with respect to Gloryland project. Just a little background, the scope of the project included removal of existing road structure, installation of new gravel surface, sub-base and base course, as well as installation of new asphalt pavement, along with some landscape restoration at the end. The project was out for bid on February 9th, 2021, and as per administration's recommendation, Council awarded the project to Canelson Sand and Gravel on March 16, 2021. So the work with the excavation started on May 20, 2021. Overall, the construction was phased out in stages, which the reason was to have residents access to one lane at a time. Also, the contractor took little over 8 weeks to complete the project. While the project was progressing, we did came across few challenges. One being while the excavation was going on, we came across some underground springs. To address that, we pumped out the water and we were able to stabilize the base with respect to additional layer of geogrid and geotextile, along with extra layer of gravel. Also, in some locations, there were shallow utilities, so we had to limit the depth of excavation. So the contractor was able to work around without jeopardizing the strength of the base. Also, there were, as the existing subgrade was not built of ideal materials, we were having issues getting the optimum compaction with respect to gravel. However, we did undertook several testing techniques like proof rolling, in situ material testing to determine that the compaction was optimum as per the contract. And the paving on a section was only allowed once the compaction test was passed. Administration also worked closely with the contractor and engineers to determine some cost-saving solutions at the time when the project was progressing. One of the solutions determined was to limit the excavation where the existing gravel had ideal compaction, which means we were doing random tests on the existing gravel in Glory Land, and those spots where the gravel compaction was more than 100%, we left it as it is. And we just added whatever the difference was with respect to the design, which allowed us to save on gravel quantities as well as excavation quantities. So that was one of the cost-saving solutions we were able to determine with respect by working closely with contractors and engineers. For asphalt, thickness and compaction were verified by taking cores on site. And overall, the thickness was satisfactory. However, in few spots, the compaction was under 98%, which is our contract requirement. So based on that, we had to penalize the contractor for $8,028, which is for insufficient compaction, which is equivalent to 1.9% of the total asphalt quantity pay. So the total asphalt quantity pay item was $405,000. So they were only penalized for $8,000.
Okay.
The approved 2020 capital budget was $2.19 million. And at the end of the project, we landed at $1.419 million. So the project was successfully completed under budget and on time with $770,000 in surplus. We are currently retaining $20,500 in deficiency holdback, which will be released once the deficiencies are rectified. And all the unused fund, as the project was funded from MSI 100%, any unused fund can be used towards other project. The project was completed in accordance with town standard, and also we were carrying out day-to-day communication with the residents there, and also during the course of the project, we did receive some good compliments from the residents. So my recommendation is to accept this report as information.
Okay. Questions, comments? Councillor Adams.
Make a motion that council accepts this report for information.
Microphone. He makes a motion that we accept it for information. I'll just make a comment that I honestly think the crews did a fantastic job out there. Worked really well with residents. I thought the final product was great. And the fact that basically came in almost 40% below budget is fantastic for taxpayers and ratepayers here in Slave Lake, especially at a time when we're going into budget and the province has cut our MSI funding by approximately $1 million a year. To save $770,000 is significant. Great job.
Thank you.
Motion is on the floor. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Kush. Next on the agenda is correspondence. There's a letter from WJS. And so essentially it's talking about the fact that the government of Alberta has recently announced that Children's Services Intervention contracts currently funded in the North Region will be ending on March 31st of next year, and that the agencies will be required to submit proposals to provide services to start April 1st of 2022. So WJS provides support services to children, families in this area and other communities throughout Alberta for several years. Their experience doing youth work, providing in-home parenting supports and strategies, and connecting families to other community resources and partners puts WJS in a strong position to continue to strengthen families and build resilient communities. WJS envisions this new request for proposals as an opportunity to not only maintain their current levels of service, but expand on them. And as a result, they are asking for a formal letter of support to accompany their proposal to Children's Services. So knowing that, questions, comments, thoughts on that? Councillor Brandel.
Well, when I was reading through this, I was wondering if there was any slack that they can take up from the Missing Parent Link and the Children's Resource Network that lacks because our area is so big and we don't get all of the services. Just wondering if they say that they're going to expand. I was wondering if we can find that out.
Nope, I don't disagree, Councillor Ferguson.
I met with Andrew last week, and so he asked me to include this in the agenda. So they're hoping for an expansion of services. Worst case scenario, if they don't get it, they could see elimination of some services, but they're hoping to expand their programming. So what exactly that would look like, I don't know, but they're trying to get as many letters of support as possible to build their case.
Okay. So sorry, Councillor Ferguson, you connected with Andrew there last week.
Yeah,
is there a time constraint on this?
Sooner rather than later was his remarks. I think by mid-December, they're going to be sending in their formal application. So ideally, if we're going to provide a letter of support, it'd be by the end of this week.
Okay. So, I am familiar with some of the work that WJS does in the community. I think they do a great job. I'm just kind of curious from another level, like what would they potentially could see for expanded services and what that looks like. And so I'd love for them to kind of come do a 10-minute presentation and say, hey, this is what we're doing now. This is what we think we can continue to do. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to put this off till Tuesday and have them come do that.
I would imagine, I think he said December 14th. I can reach out to him though and see if that would give him enough time.
Okay. December 14th would be that date. So
yeah, I think that's the date I have in my mind. So right
okay. So personally, what I'd love to do is make a motion that we request WJS to come to next week's council meeting to give us a brief overview of the services they currently deliver and the services that they could potentially expand upon.
Sure.
Councillor Hughes.
What about in the event that they cannot come next Tuesday and then we miss the deadline with our letter of support? Could we add a note to still provide the requested letter even if they can't attend, and maybe have a delegation later to explore, the options? I just don't want to miss the deadline on something that they're requesting as well. So.
Point noted. Well, we can do them as two separate motions. So motion number one is to have them attend, let's call it a future council meeting then. Let's amend that motion. So it's a future council meeting. That motion's on the floor. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That one's carried. And then you can do a subsequent motion that you
like to direct administration to please draft a formal letter of support to accompany their proposal to WJS.
not to
Well,
to Children's Services.
yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion on that? Call the question. Those in favor? That's carried. Mayor's Corner. So I had a couple meetings this week in regards to the Alberta North Central Alliance. So this is our group of 5 municipalities and 5 First Nations. And so our next meeting we're intending to do on January 10th. And so the idea of that meeting, the focus would be to focus on some education. So although we've got this protocol signed and we want to work together, and in the spirit of working together and collaborating together, before we just jumped into some projects, one of the things that we learned from Tri-Council is just understanding how different each organization operates, what capacity they have, and that type of thing was something that we felt was important. And so the intention is at the January meeting, we intend to do in person at the Legacy Center in an REP style event. And essentially each community would come forth and do a 15 to 20 minute presentation and say, this is how our governance model works. This is how many people in our council, this is how many people we represent. This is how our funding strategies work. This is what we can do and can't do, and kind of talk a little bit about the things that are some of our priorities. What are some of our weaknesses or things that we're concerned about, as well as get into some sharing about like, what is your concern about this group? What is your fear about this group, and that sort of thing, and just kind of have some open discussion. What was also apparent though is that there was an overwhelming feeling from the group that they wanted to make sure that we had council buy-in from the pieces that we were doing. And so, I know that we've had a number of conversations behind the scene that we endorsed what was going on with Alberta North Central Alliance. But the discussion piece, and my suggestion was maybe for a couple of those initial meetings, and you're doing some of that stuff, that you had more members of council present. So right now, currently it's just myself and Councillor Gramlich. But there was, some of the councils are like 11 people or more. And so there was concern about just it getting too big. So we kind of basically said, we would leave it up to the individual councils to decide how many members that they would bring. But the suggestion was to have 3 to 4 of your council members present for that meeting. That would be like an all day type thing. And so, over the next couple of weeks there, we need to figure out some additional people that might be interested from our group going from this January 10th to that meeting. So I'll let you guys think about that. We don't need to decide it today. Also, we applied for basically a project through SETI. And so SETI is a federally funded group that actually helped the Tri-Council previously. They had some economic development money, and their whole focus, their whole mandate is to increase collaboration between municipalities and First Nations, as well promote more economic development, in especially in regards to Indigenous opportunities and First Nation opportunities. And so we actually were successful. So actually backing up, the way it works is you basically apply, then they start shortlisting, there's an interview, they shortlist some more, and so on and so forth. And so we made the application in, and we are the only group that's even remotely this size. And they are very interested. And so we're supposed to get a decision on that within the next week to 2 weeks. But the interview I felt went really well. And so we had a number of the municipalities and First Nations on it. And so I spent a couple hours on that yesterday. Last week, we got a number of resident concerns that came in regards to the REP programs in our facilities. So did my first vlog post-election there. And lastly, I spent some time going through the budget binder. And so I just want to say to administration there, I actually really like how it's kind of laid out. There's a lot of pieces for new council members there, that there's information in different tabs and different departments to kind of talk as a high level, the big picture, how those pieces work. So I just want to say, I'm anxious to go through the process, and we start next week. But great first version of it, and great way it's prepared. The only thing I think would be interesting is that there's a number of pieces within that have the, we'll talk about a department, and there's kind of a snapshot of some of those budget codes and so on and so forth. I was just thinking, rather than print all these other documents and do whatever, or create another process or whatever, it would be interesting to be able to have the individual line stuff on a screen or something, that if we wanted to see it, any more individual type pieces, that it would be quick to look at. Okay. So with that, that is all the stuff that we have for public. We have a number of closed session pieces that we have to go through. but I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried.